Hello, Bob Parkinson here with driver training. Today I'm going to be going over a PowerPoint that's behind me that's going out with a lot of the training videos for the next training block for the engineer CE department-wide training. So Gary Gadak and myself, we posted some videos that are going to be on driver training's training page for this training block. It'll show the 3 different drills that we're going to be doing for this block starting March 28th. The first drill is going to be kind of encompassing tandem pumping with some drafting. Second drill is going to be like a tandem pumping with a stinger run with pumping the humid. And then the third drill is going to be a 3-in-1 assignment with 2 trucks pulling their own plugs, pulling hand lines, and 1 truck's going to develop an intake issue. And the crew, the 2 engineers are going to have to do a face-to-face while the one with the trouble has to execute emergency traffic, going tank water, maybe wanting to go to 100 pounds PSI to conserve a little bit more water for the guys. You actually gain another minute by doing that. Give them a little more time to be able to exit the building while they solve the pumping issue. So the why, I guess, is this storyboard right in front of me is a fire that Lance had, Lance Jones at 22 when he was a new engineer at 22. It was a 3-in-1 assignment to the farmhouse right there on Dobbins. 39 truck went straight to the fire, operating off tank water. Lance was assigned to come in, back up to the Dobbins Canal, pull a draft, and then tandem pump back to 39. It's not something we do all the time, but it's probably important that we know and understand these pumping methods. Like today, we're going to talk about dual, tandem, and relay. So in his case, he had a little bit of, the tandem along with drafting. So if we haven't drafted in a long time, we kind of maybe might be a little bit rusty at it. So in the videos, we go over how to draft with older apparatus and new. So this was one that he had. So when he pulled in, he backed up, pulled the draft. His crew pulled the supply hose by hand jacking it to 39, and it turned out to be a good event for him. So when I was at Station 10, we would get captains that would rove in. Of course, they ask, like, what's in your due that maybe we should be aware of? One I would point out is if we were responding down the access road to 3001 North Black Canyon or 3011, 3011 is pretty far from the only plug on the south end, which is at Jack in Box, which is at I-17 and Thomas. So the way we pre-planned it when we had 2 trucks at the station was, if we had to go 3011, you can see it's 815 feet from a stinger run. 3001, there's 2 palm trees. You could have your firefighter get off, unhook your supply hose, wrap it around one of those 2 palm trees, and then drive straight to the fire. 850 feet, operating off tank water. Captain's gonna be calling for the second truck, grab the plug, add jack in the box. They gotta lay a run of 815 feet to the stinger. So it goes from the plug in their intake, and then it's going to go out their discharge, feeding it to the forward truck. So when we're looking at this, it's unique. And then the third truck is going to pump the humid. So you got a lay of more than 1,000 feet. So when we're talking like a tandem run, it's more than what our truck has on the bed. So more than 1,000 feet. So when we're talking that kind of scenario, it's going to be in the intake of the truck, out the discharge to send it to the other truck. Third truck is obviously we need that for the little extra kick on the GPM. So let's say our plug is a great plug, Phoenix plug, 800 GPM. By the time we get the third truck pumping the humid, pushing it all the way to that 1,600 feet away, you're probably, if you're leaving 20-30 like we always do on our intake, that 800 GPM plug's probably 500 or 600. So it's going to be good to operate some hand lines, but nothing that we can do for anything defensive. So this was one that we were pre-planned for quite a bit. You can see off Osborne, you have 2 plugs that you could come against the grain. So if this thing were to go greater alarms, that first captain's going to have quite a challenge with bringing in everybody. So they'd probably be bringing them off 23rd Avenue, staging off Osborne, being ready to bring everybody in on against the grain to it. So that was one we had for Station 10. So I'll kind of go through the PowerPoint with just some key slides. I hope you guys kind of look at the whole content of the PowerPoint. It's pretty short, but what the total objective is knowing and understanding these pumping methods. So dual pumping, tandem pumping, and relay. So tandem and relay are basically the same pumping concept. It's just the amount of trucks in play on it. So tandem meaning 2 trucks going from a water source into one, out to the discharge to the other truck, more than 1,000 feet. So that's what we have for engine 10. So a lot of our first dues have some of these water sources that we have to overcome more than 1,000 feet. That's what we're talking about with a tandem run. Relay could be like one of these ones down south, one water source, maybe we travel into the reservation there, and we have to go 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So you're down several, 4 or 5 trucks involved going in the intake, out the discharge to get it from point A to point B on that. Dual pumping is like what we typically have like on an aggressive firefight where we got 2 trucks, they took their own plugs and they're operating their hand lines with their crews. What happens, and I'm going to show some slides of intake issues. When a truck develops an intake issue, it could be a hose line or it could be whatever. That crew member, that engineer is going to have to execute emergency traffic, close the intake, go to tank water, go to 100 PSI to buy those guys another minute, 5 minutes, and then go do a face-to-face with the engineer on how we're going to configure a dual pumping method to save it. So always do a face-to-face with the other engineer and then solve the problem. So we'll kind of get into it on the why. So knowing our pumps. So on all the newer trucks, you have the pump rating plate right in the middle of the pump panel. So 150 is our number. It doesn't matter if you're talking a 1250 impeller or a larger 1500 impeller right here. They're rated at max volume at 150 PSI. When we start to exceed that and we go to 200 PSI, we lose 30% of our volume. When we go to 250, we're cut in half. So why do we need to know the numbers? So why is when we speed up the wheel, they sit vertically in the pump. When we speed up the wheel, the impeller fins can't grab water. When we start getting above 200, between 200 and 250, we're going to overheat those trucks. You're going to overheat the pump, and then you're overheat the engine. So the alarms are going to go off. So normal when guys are declaring emergency traffic, I need help, my truck's overheating, the mechanic's simply going to come down, dial you down below a reasonable amount, and then pull the tank fill to get that hot water out. Hopefully you haven't deadheaded your pump. So knowing these parameters of where our trucks need to be is pretty important. So on the pump panel. So on the pump panel, it's located right in the middle, that pump rating plate right there. So knowing your pump panel and knowing where everything's at is pretty important. So sometimes all the lighting, like we have our lighting switches right here. It's always a good idea to have extra flashlights in case your lighting on your pump panel goes out on you. So knowing where everything is at is pretty important so you can kind of know where they're oriented and where they're at when we go to grab them. The new trucks are pretty awesome where they have a manual pull right here for engaging your pump. So in the case that you may not, your truck may not engage electronically, we have that little pull as a secondary device. We can pull it and when it comes out probably a couple of inches to manually engage the pump. That's a last resort. So before you go back to the cab, pull that, it should engage. If it doesn't, start from square one again. So go back in, take out a pump, maybe even push in the parking brake, reset it, so that it kind of reboots that whole computer and go through your steps again. So this is what we do for all our new Academy folks, our driver operators, everybody. So when we're talking big water, when we have a great water source in Phoenix and we have one truck pulling up to support the ladder on the front end of the event, again, we're getting, from our Phoenix plugs anywhere from 600 to 800 GPM. So why is it important? Ladder guys kind of know when they pull up and they got one truck supporting them, they're probably going to tip their stack tips to 1.5 inches, which is 600 GPM, or 1 3/4 inches, which is 800 GPM. So it is what it is until we get everybody in play. So when we get that second truck to reverse off and pump the plug, that's where it's kind of a big deal for us, because we can outperform our limitations of our two trucks by simply having a second hose on the ground. So we can go from 800 GPM to anywhere from 17 to 2000 if we do everything right. So key pumper, ideally, if we can get them in play and the plug will allow it, if we can get them at that 150 number slowly, so they send that water to the forward truck, slowly try to get to 150. If we can get them to 150, that's ideal conditions. You don't have to go above 150. That's max volume to the forward truck. So 100-pound plug, 50 pounds more, get to 150, ideal. So the key pumper's barely working. When we look at the gauge on the forward truck, that'll drive the forward truck's intake gauge up to anywhere from 120 to 130 at idle. So where we can hit our big numbers is 165 to 170. So if we exceed that, again, these impellers will spin too quick. So even though you might have 80 pounds left on your intake, you're still gonna have quite a bit, when we start to spin it too fast at 170, 180, 190, this spins too quick, your volume falls out. So we gotta go back to the number that we can get max volume. So when you look at this photograph, you have the first generation American LaFrance, that's rated at 1250. You can run that with your two guns, probably 2.5-inch smooth bores, two good drill bits going to work. Let's say you still got 80 left on your intake. You could still run other devices. So you can run a Blitz 500 GPM, you can run a play pipe, another 300 GPM, you could run the new 2-inch hose with the smooth bore. You have options. So it's kind of like a bank account. Once you kind of hit your threshold number with the two trucks operating in the right positions, it's up to you how you want to manage all those different items you can run on it. So dual pumping, again, this is kind of like, two trucks come in, they grab their own plug, come into the event. One truck develops an issue while operating. Could be a liner, could be a hose liner. Guy executes emergency traffic, the guys do a face-to-face, and basically like in the drawing, the first truck's got a good plug, and he's gonna deliver what is left over to the other truck. So let's say he's running those two lines on the top middle. He's got a 100-pound plug running two lines. He's still gonna be about 85 pounds left on his intake. So that 85 that's unused will go straight to the other truck. What's cool about this is it's unrestricted water going from one truck to the other. So the other truck could open up, start managing their lines. So as both trucks start opening hand lines, both intake gauges are gonna reflect the same number. So as they start to come down, they just gotta be careful that they don't go below the 20 to 30. On this, if we hear emergency traffic, someone just declared emergency traffic, they're dual pumping, and we have someone staged on a plug, it's pretty crucial that we have those guys pump the plug. That's another 300 GPM that those guys could get. So it's not a matter of should we do it, you should absolutely, the engineer should get off, start pumping that plug. The crew can get an assignment to come up and help pull another line, whatever. But the engineer needs to be pumping that plug. It's pretty crucial that we get them in play, pumping the plug. So this is kind of like the photograph on the left was an actual fire that 30 had. They had a broken water main. The dirt and debris went right into their intake right when they were in the middle of a firefight. The photograph on the right is what we see out here with the hose liners. So after a while, you get the signs and symptoms of bad hoses, and it'll actually throw a liner right into your intake and clog you. So this is another different day, another liner going right to the strainer, almost made it right through the strainer of the intake. Signs and symptoms of bad hose. The hose on the background laying flat is normal. The one in the front, foreground, is not. When we start seeing water seeping through the jacket of the hose or they're standing up like that, we can't stop that fire event, but what we can do is start pulling hose off to be prepared for it. So grab some extra hose off your truck, lay it near the hose that potentially could fail, have a clamp ready, because if it does fail, we could clamp a charged supply hose, do a quick emergency traffic, declare emergency traffic, go tank water, fix the problem. Clamp the hose, run out there, you already have a host laying there, get the bad piece out, new piece in, call our command back, hey, solve the problem, no big deal. So be ahead of it, be prepared. So things we do is, like, we have dry erase markers. So dry erase markers are kind of huge when we're talking like our hoses. We like to mark along the collars on these hoses close to us, like if they're starting to separate from the collar. So the markers are good too for our pump panel. Like if we got crews coming up, they forget their passports, whatever, we can write engine 1, engine 2, whatever on our pump panel with our dry erase for accountability too. So dry erase markers are great. When we're talking crew accountability, we can always write on those gates who's where, and later we can go get those. But the markers are good for the marking on the pump panel and marking our hoses for anything that signs and symptoms of a bad hose. So Tandem. So the top photograph's just kind of doing the display. Water source kind of far from a building, using 2 pumps to drive it to greater floors with PSI and volume. 2 pumps they work a lot easier together. For us, it's probably going to be that run that's more than 1,000 feet what we carry on our truck. So first truck's going to do a stinger run, go to the fire, operate. Second one's going to grab a plug, hook up to the stinger, and get it all going. Third truck's going to pump the plug. The one on the bottom, I can't emphasize enough, it's probably that one we have down south where we got one water source that we have to overcome 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So, by the time let's say it's a, 800 GPM plug at the beginning truck, by the time you get it to truck 5, that 800 GPM is much lower. So by the time you get all those trucks in play, you're just protecting what hasn't burned. So this is some of our trucks, just to kind of sum it up. With our first generation American LaFrances, they're rated at 1250 GPM. So if we know how all our engines operate and our ladders, we kind of know where we need to put them. Ladder 20 and 50 were kind of unique, a little bit bigger truck. They were rated at 1500 GPM. All the Pierce ladders were rated at 2000. Now we do have the Pierce on the bottom, the one that came from Miami. That one kind of fooled us because we thought that was for sure at least a 1500 GPM truck. That one's rated at 1250. The new E1 sticks are rated at 1500 GPM. So we kind of, like if we know where they need to run, we know how we can spend, like our intake, kind of spend that on best usage, I guess. This was one of our engineer academies with a couple of guys. Justin declared emergency traffic, Eric came up, they formed a plan. It's a quick video on how they solved it. So this PowerPoint will make more sense when you look at this PowerPoint and then you view the videos that we had made up for the 3 different drills you guys are going to do when you come down as a crew. So what's important, I think it's good that we're getting the crews to come down together, because the captain's going to understand what the engineers come down here and get trained on. There's no mystery, like what is driver training to teach you guys on this stuff. So if you can better understand what we teach your driver operators, then as you know, you guys are driving up to your fire events, you better know and understand different methods that you could use with your engineers. So look forward to seeing you on this next training block. This will be posted up on driver training's FirePoint on the training page. So this next training block will have the videos with the PowerPoint. So look forward to seeing you next training block.